Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Action Comics issue 1098, written by Mark Waid, with art by Ryan Sook and Patricio Dopesh, colors by Ivan Placencia, and letters by Steve Wands. The reign of the Superboys continues as Epoch, the Lord of Time, has stolen the Kryptonian spaceship that had brought Clark to Earth from the Kent Farm basement. Martian Manhunter believes that Epoch could use the ship's technology to create weapons that could hurt Superboy and in turn disrupt the timeline. Manhunter asks his team for a quick meeting, and Booster believes that thanks to damaging Epoch's time circuits in their fight, the villain is now trapped in that time period with them. They just need to smoke him out. But Mary thinks that thanks to the teleportation abilities, he could be anywhere on Earth right now, making looking for him like looking for a needle in a haystack. Mary suggests that they go on the defensive and protect Clark as best they can, since if Superboy is killed, then his future self will never be able to go on to win the Omega tournament, and time itself will be destroyed by Darkseid. Waid laying down the stakes and tying it all back into DCKO is great. It adds a bit more weight to the story outside. If Superboy dies, Superman no longer exists, which I guess would mean the entire DCU would stop existing, at least as what we're told here. It also kind of nicely ties back in with what we saw in Doomsday Clock, where it stated that the universe literally bends towards Superman, and taking him away causes that universe to unravel and die and become not what it should be. To better protect Clark, the heroes meet back with the Kents, wanting to get a better understanding of the rocket ship, so they want the Kents to tell them everything they know about it, how they found it, and what they did with it and Clark. The Kents do find time-traveling Martians all a bit too much, and Manhunter understands, but needs to know everything they know. Manhunter also not just going into the Kents' minds to find out what they need without consent is cool. It just is something he's been doing a lot lately. Before he would just kind of tap into people's minds, but I like that there is that whole consent thing where it's like, we can't really just invade people's minds anymore. Also, his powers are a lot weaker than usual thanks to the events of Justice League Unlimited, which Waid is also writing. So I like that he has the power to find out what it needs to. It's just not as powerful as it used to be. Ma and Pa explained that for many years they tried to have children of their own, but nothing ever worked, and it made them feel sad to think and see something they couldn't have themselves. I'm glad Waid is diving into the stuff with the Kents that we never really get to see. The last time we saw stuff like this happen was back during the early New 52 Action Comics written by Sholly Fish in the backups, and it was genuinely some of the best Kent-related stories ever written. Pa knows that their prayers were answered when they saw Clark's rocket crash land near the farm. Jonathan remembers how they probably should have reported the alien craft to the government, but there was no way in hell they were going to hand an innocent baby over to the government, with God knows what they would do to him. Grabbing a tarp from his truck, Jonathan covered up the ship they find and put it in his flatbed truck, taking it back to the barn and putting it in the basement. While they knew saving the child was right, the Kents knew that keeping him wasn't an option, since they couldn't just turn up one day with a child around Smallville, especially because Smallville was such a small town at the time, so news travels fast, and they'll have to turn Clark over to the county foster services and just hope they would be entrusted with Clark once the proper paperwork had been filed. I like we are doing this part of the origin over again, since it's always really overlooked that the Kents just one day didn't have a kid, and then the next, they have a kid, and there's no questions asked about where he came from or, whose kid he was. It was just accepted as the Kent's child. Something you can't really do in modern times anymore, because I see what Waid is doing here. He's basically rewriting Superman's origin so that writers have to stop using Jeff Johns' secret origins. That's wildly outdated now. So I like that we're actually getting a writer who's writing the origin and thinking about all of these small things that either needed to be corrected or actually put into the book for it to make some logical sense. I also like that Waid is kind of combining a lot of Superman's early origin stuff. Like at the start there was stuff where he was sent to an orphanage and raised in an orphanage before growing up to become Superman, or the Kents would die and he would be left on his own and that sort of stuff. Waid is kind of combining all of them into one here, which is quite cool. The Kents hoped that their reputation and friendships around town and the county would help them, and they were told they would have to wait a day to hear any news. The Kents Kents stayed up all night worrying they would be denied their baby, but as Martha puts it, the Lord smiled down upon them and delivered Clark back into their open arms. Once Clark was back with the Kents, Jonathan decided to tinker around with the ship, and one day while looking after Clark in the barn, the young Clark touched the ship and a sunstone crystal revealed itself from inside, projecting images of Krypton and Clark's biological parents. While Ma and Pa couldn't understand the alien language being spoken, the images told them everything they needed to know. Images of a far-off alien world that calmed little Clark, and thanks to the confirmation that Clark was indeed an alien, the Kents began taking an interest in alien life and the cosmos. Wade really is making this entire run a brand new updated origin. He's covering all those little details like I said before. And as a details guy, I love that. He's just thinking about everything in this run. Booster, Mary, and Manhunter want to know where the crystal is, and before Clark goes and gets it up in his room, Manhunter asks the Kents how often they thought and were worrying about what if someone from his home world came to claim Clark. The Kents know that every day they were worried about something like that, but John lets slip that they will never have to worry about that, and that will never happen as Clark has found his true home in the Kents, which is technically him breaking his own rules about the time travel and, not revealing too much. But as he tells Booster, rules can be bent. Upstairs, Clark shows Mary the crystal, telling her that it makes him feel some sort of comfort when he's near it. Clark, though, is worried about what he'll tell Lana in school the next day because he had to abandon her at the Metropolis Expo when Epoch turned up. Not to mention she's not really into him, more so Superboy than Clark. Mary acting as Clark's big sister is the perfect role for her, and why Wade chose her to come along on this mission. She's, the big sister of Billy Batson, Shazam, who's very much a Superman character, and it's really cool seeing her apply those things she learned as Billy's older sister to Clark. It's a really cool dynamic, and it's one you never really see with Superman. You see him with Kara a little later on down the line, but then he is kind of like the bigger brother or the bigger sibling in that relationship. It's never the other way around, and I like that Wade is actually giving us a chance to see that, where Clark gets to be the little brother for a change. I also do like that it kind of nips in the bud the whole people thinking that Mary and Clark were going to have some sort of romantic relationship while they were children. That's not happening at all. This is very much a big sister, little brother dynamic. Mary has an idea on how to deal with Lana, and the next day at school, she accompanies Clark, telling the angry Lana that she is friends with the Kents and is in town since her family might be moving to Smallville from Philadelphia. She tells Lana that she is there at the school to see what it's like, and upon seeing Clark with another girl, Lana actually wants to hang out with Clark again, more so than ever before, wanting him to come by to study with her later that Thursday. Back at the Kent farm, Booster tries to figure out how to use the crystal to find the rocket ship, assuring the Kents that Manhunter is taking care of the farming since they need to stay close. The Kents feel useless since they want to help but have no idea how to. Booster asks about Clark and who's teaching him the ropes of being a superhero, but the Kents know that Clark is kind of finding his own way and making his own share of mistakes, but he's also learning from them and becoming a better man because of it. This is all something we've seen in Wade's recent Action Comics story arcs. Clark has all been learning about how to become Superboy. Booster getting to learn a bit more about the hero who inspired him is really cool too. He's genuinely excited to learn more about Clark's younger years, and I do kind of like that every other member of this team has a job. Manhunter is out dealing with the farm and making sure everything's safe. Mary is looking after Clark at school, and then there's Michael, who's just kind of hanging out on the farm, kind of doing super science stuff, but also kind of not. He's just kind of winging it, which is Booster Gold's whole modus operandi, just winging it. After tinkering with the crystal some, Booster manages to activate it and later shows the heroes that he was able to use the crystal to track down the rocket ship to an abandoned farmhouse nearby. Superboy can't seem to see anything in the house, but Manhunter knows that Epoch is using the ship's cloaking abilities to mask himself and the ship, although the Martian can see thermal imaging, so he's able to spot Epoch in the basement of the house. Superboy wastes no time and smashes into the house as Epoch finishes taking the ship apart, planning on using the energy he is able to pull from it to kill Superboy. Clark tells him to take his best shot since he's intent on killing him, so Epoch powers up the new Red Sun radiation cannon, blasting Superboy with it. The blast doesn't actually work though. In fact, all it does is tickle Superboy, and that is because this isn't really Superboy, it's Manhunter, who keeps Epoch distracted as the other heroes smash through the wall behind Epoch and pull him him outside into the fields. Manhunter doubling as Superboy, of course, was going to happen. I was sure it would have happened a little bit earlier with the school shenanigans. Also, technically, this is the first time John is also doubling as Clark. He's done it many times throughout their history together, and I like that this is kind of the genesis of that, and I'm sure it's going to happen again in this story before it's over. Heroes keep the heat on Epoch, blasting him down into the ground as the villain adapts thanks to the Kryptonian force he was able to pull from the ship, blasting Manhunter with simple artillery which injures him with shrapnel while deploying an energy net over the other heroes, separating them from Superboy. Epoch is intent on killing Superboy thanks to the obstacle he becomes to him in the future, and the villain plans on not just killing Clark, but also his friends and then even his parents too. Hearing this sends Clark into a red rage where he flies Epoch high into the sky, ripping open his containment shielding and destroying his suit in a huge blast of red sun energy. As Mary saves Superboy from hitting the ground, Epoch manages to teleport himself away into the time stream again. I hope we actually get more of Epoch, or at least a bit more meatier bits, because all he seems to be doing is jumping in, they fight for, 1 or 2 pages and then he jumps out again. There's nothing really more to this villain at the moment. He's fairly generic at the moment in his motives. He just wants to kill Superboy, and I feel like there should be a bit more to him. I know obviously not every villain needs more of a motive than, A kills B, but I feel like there should be something more here, especially because they've been bigging up this whole Reign of the Superboys event, and this is like at the crux of it. But right now, Epoch is a very thin villain. With the villain gone for now, the heroes regroup and check on Clark, who reveals that something has happened to him and he no longer has any of his powers. Well, I'm sure the powers will be back since it's red sun radiation. It will come back very slowly. In fact, in one of my recent videos on the storyline Up and Away, that was a reason why Clark didn't have his powers for an entire year, because he flew through a red sun. So it's probably going to be a hot minute before the powers come back, and I'm sure that's going to lead to some fun situations for Clark. With Manhunter being there, I'm sure it's going to lead to him pulling Superboy duties, and they'll lead to some stuff where he has to double as Clark and, ward off people who think that Clark is Superboy, Superboy appearing in the same place as Clark, that sort of stuff, stuff we'd see all the time in comics of the 80s and 90s. We do know Lana's father was up to something a few issues ago, and I have a feeling that's going to come back in some form. Like maybe he tries to prove that Superboy is Clark and Clark is able to prove him wrong thanks to Manhunter doubling as him. Wade's got some fun ways to go in the story, and I'm excited to see what he does. Action Comics issue 1098 was another great installment in the Reign of the Superboys event. The team dynamic Wade has got going on is so much fun. Everyone gets a moment to shine this issue, and I love the brother-sister dynamic that Clark and Mary have, something we don't really get to see a lot in Superman media. Usually he's the older brother to Kara or some of the other Superman family members, but I like that he for once gets to be the younger brother. It's a really fun dynamic, and hopefully we get to see a little bit more of that in the coming issues. I'm also hoping we actually get to see a bit more of Epoch. He's a very thin villain right now, and I feel like we need something a bit more meatier for this storyline, being that's the big Reign of the Superboys event, and Epoch just really isn't cutting it for me right now. He's just kind of doing the same thing every issue, and it's not really doing much to forward the story on all that much, and I'm just hoping we get to see a little bit more of him, or a little bit more of his side of the story in the coming issues. I'm going to give this issue a 7 out of 10.